Thank you, Gary, and good morning, everyone. Bright and early on a Monday morning. And for some of us who watched the very end of the Academy Awards, it was an early morning. The other side of my story. Um, it really is a pleasure to be here, not only because of the topic, but also so many friends and colleagues of the last several years of my life, I think, that are sitting here, and some I haven't seen for a while since I moved over to the department, so it'll be a treat to reconnect. I'm really pleased to be part of this event because it is something that some of you know has been a real passion of mine, and this whole linkage of our natural resources and forestry experience into the urban environment and the expansion of that. So for that aspect, it's wonderful to be here and to be part of this Forest Service and National Science Foundation sponsored effort. So thanks to those of you who are helping put on this event, also to the academies for hosting us. It's always a pleasure to be at the Keck Center, and many partners who are here. And I probably have a much longer list I should be going through, but in particular, since I know we're having a reception sponsored by them, the Sustainable Urban Forest Coalition is with us this week, and I know they've got work going on later this week. Davy, of course, is here, the International Society of Arboriculture, and Save a Tree. So some of our most important stakeholders and partners in this event are part of this activity. And what I appreciate about it, it's really speaks to what we're trying to do. It's bridging science and research with the practice and how that practice has changed over time. And in particular, how far we've moved from urban trees and just thinking about trees and in their own place to trees as part of a larger ecosystem. And I think that has been a tremendous change in the whole science, but also in the practice and how we approach these areas. If I do this right, okay. Yeah, so I thought I would, since now I'm keen, I was actually supposed to be on a panel later tomorrow, so I've sort of moved what I was going to say on the panel. I was allowed to use a few more PowerPoint slides, and so capturing some of the higher level discussion points that hopefully will come out through the other presentations as well as the breakouts. And so it's going to be a bit of a litany, but I think it's important to just think about and what are the different aspects of this issue and the sphere that we're talking about. And for me, I was born and raised actually in Philadelphia, and one of the things that I've seen is the tremendous power of community that has emerged in that city, way beyond what I expected, not only in delivering food systems, but also looking at the quality of ecosystem services that an urban area, urban ecosystem can provide. And so thinking about that and what the big topics are that I think we should be thinking about is embodied in that first one. The very fact that we've shifted to talking about urban ecosystems, not only from the biophysical, but also from the social and the societal and how you pull those pieces together has been a tremendous change in the way science is done. Some of you have heard me say this before, but when I started, my professional society is the Ecological Society of America. When I started, and I think it was my second presentation, I was put in the very last session and the very last day, and it was me talking about strip mine reclamation, one urban person, one ag ecologist, and it was basically the kitchen sink of what everything the rest of the Ecological Society didn't really know to talk about. Fast forward, and I think it was maybe 6 years ago, there were 5 symposiums on urban ecosystems and a whole bunch of contributed sessions. It has really, I think, been a sea change in the way that profession thinks about the urban environment. And it's the fact that we're all here and bringing the different pieces together just reinforces that this is a much bigger topic, and it really is merits a lot of the changes that have been happening. So first, just thinking about this whole area as urban ecosystems. And then recognizing that another aspect is we really are thinking about sustainable cities, using that word in a very deliberate way. This administration began an effort called Sustainable Communities in, I guess it was 2009 was the first meeting that I went to, with EPA, DOT, and HUD playing a really key role. And how could they break down the silos of government, which I have sort of down in the 4th bullet, but breaking down those silos, recognizing they could all bring different aspects of their authorities and their programs together for a common good. And they started in asking USDA to be part of it, which was, for one thing, a tremendous change for us, because that's not something that the Department of Agriculture in all of its programs. We have 16 agencies, so there's a lot of things that happen in agencies that do not necessarily touch the urban area directly. But we started being asked to bring our experiences in agriculture, in natural resources, in ecosystem services to this larger issue of sustainable communities and sustainable cities. So putting that in context and thinking about how does this concrete jungle, this thing that has a lot of bits, moving parts to it, really look at the interconnections and how these areas can be vibrant and self-sustaining and have all the ecological characteristics that we've talked about in other ecosystems, even as the built infrastructure was in place. I think it also the third point brought us into a whole new way of looking at our science and just how these issues are just by the definition multidisciplinary, require a whole new mix of skills to be brought to the table. And so you have your traditional, perhaps, urban forestry expertise and waste managers, et cetera, but you also are bringing a whole new aspect of soil science and biodiversity, thinking about cities as centers of biodiversity and refugia of biodiversity, thinking about how urban wildlife actually can not be a pest, but actually can be integrated in a very positive way, and how do we work within those systems. And so actually in prep for this meeting, I was given some very nice notes from various people, this whole concept of socioecology. I really had not heard that word until thinking about this keynote. And it is very intriguing to me because it more than any word, but maybe it's just the concepts behind it, are deliberately integrating in a very different way social sciences and biophysical ecological sciences. And many of you who are social scientists know we've been talking this game for a long time. And how do you bridge social science into the rest of the work that we do? I feel like in urban environments, you guys have figured it out, and that it is a very deliberate process of bringing these different disciplines together. In fact, and I forgot to bring a copy, but I just got my brand new issue of Frontiers in Ecology and Environment. And I think I grabbed it on last Friday, as a matter of fact. And in it is a wonderful paper on the Baltimore LTER and all the research that's been going on, which is, in my mind, a fully integrated ecological social science experiment and analysis. So that has been a big change, and I think that's another signal of the types of science that we're doing that are different. Breaking down silos in governance and management is also critical, and I think it falls from the science that comes from this. If it is multidisciplinary, the approaches have got to be a lot more integrated, and it's not sufficient to have the water managed by one agency or organization and at various levels, whether it be at a municipality or state or federal government, and the stormwater be from someone else, and the air quality be someone else, and the transportation infrastructure be someone else, without thinking about how they all come together. And that, to me, that loops back to the sustainable cities, sustainable communities concept, really looking at how all authorities can be used to address problems. And then I think the other emerging concept where we've been talking about ecosystem services from an ecological natural systems perspective for a long time, I think we have insidiously brought in this concept through our various analytical tools into urban environments. And I think in particular, iTree, I see Dave Nowak sitting over there, and he's the one who taught me all about iTree a few years ago. But just the development of that tool from some of the bare beginnings on characterizing where trees were to how you use that information to capture CO2 and other ecosystem services that are being mitigated by that tree cover, water and energy aspects of it. So it really has been the tools that we had, which may have been very deliberately developed around trees in place and creating canopy and structure, has really moved to a much more integrated ecological system. And just being able to see that maturity of our tools, but also the maturity of the science that has gone along with it. So that's been a pretty tremendous, and that of course ties to better valuing our green infrastructure and how in urban environments that there could be structures created, whether they be through changing in the way buildings are created and designed, to how green spaces ramify within that system. I frequently remember, and I actually invoke Lynn Westphal frequently about environmental justice issues in urban environments and how everyone deserves touching green space. And it doesn't have to be big. It does not have to be a central park. But this idea of being able to have systems that allow you to touch green and touch nature and allow you to learn that way is, I think, a very powerful aspect. It also, one of the areas that I have responsibility for is education within USDA, and this whole area of STEM education, and how do you get kids as early as you possibly can to think about science, technology, engineering, and math. And one of the best ways is introduce them to a community garden, get them out in their park, and get them to really feel how these things that they're observing, turning over a rock, is about science. You don't have to call it science yet. But that idea of exploring and being connected to nature can happen in very small personal ways. And that's another aspect to me of the overall urban environment and urban ecosystem. And then lastly, as part of this maturing, is something new again to me, and that came out as we were developing my remarks, is this whole emergence of stewardship and the aspects in a civil society of how stewardship has become a real touchstone in many of these urban ecosystems in these big cities that we've been working within. And so how you bring those concepts of stewardship and provide the tools associated with it, to me, is another aspect of the maturing of the research and development. So let me move on to an example. StuMap. I had not heard of this until recently and was just totally intrigued by it. I do a lot of work on geospatial, or at least I'm overseeing people who are doing work on geospatial, because we have so much information and data out there and it could be much better used to answer questions. And so as I looked at what StuMap was providing us, this whole concept of being able to map green spaces and be able to look at an urban infrastructure from the built to green has really been one of the standards that we've been using, and that's the green space on the left. But to be able to connect the dots between that and the social space, to really be able to characterize what are those networks of people working together? How do you get the skills that one community is using to develop its own urban infrastructure and green space to another? And how do you actually help break down the silos by doing that? And one of the things upon reflecting on my own growing up is the neighborhood I lived in. For those of you who know Philadelphia, I live in East Falls. And in the middle of East Falls, which is where the Falls of the Schuylkill come together with the Wissahickon. So we've got this wonderful park right behind our houses in many places, or up the street. But we have an urban park. And I've noticed since I've left, which is now quite a few years ago, this little park called McMillan. It's a 1-block square. Very boring. I mean, it has a sandbox and a bunch of trees and a little memorial that they did Memorial Day services in. But it has become, in the last 15 years, a real magnet for the community. There are regular events there. There are people who come together to plant trees and to have swap meets and to do a lot of things that bring not only the nurturing aspect of the park together, but also as a way to bring that community together. And what's really been valuable about that is when I was growing up, most of the people there had come in about 1910, 1915. It was their families that were staying there. Well, we've had a whole change in that community. And there was a while that community really had no visible presence as a community itself. But using that park and using that environment has really brought that group together. And where I live right now in Northwest DC, we have Lafayette School, but it also has a park next to it. And it does the exact same thing. It is a touchstone for even people who have no kids, who are in that neighborhood for other reasons. They come together around that space. And so I think being able to recognize that green space and social space, and to actually then create a tool that allows you to quantify, describe, and institutionalize those linkages, to me is really an exciting thing to see in the emergence of the whole science around urban areas and urban ecosystems. The other thing that I was really intrigued with is this work, I believe it's New York City, being able to quantify these networks and to be able to see where they exist and who is part of them, and the different colors reflect excuse me, the different colors reflect different types of organizations. But this idea of mapping it, it's more than, I guess the modelers in the room are going to be really excited about this, being able to quantify these linkages. But from a social, it seems to me from a social science perspective, it actually lets you show and demonstrate where you have particular types of organizations that are working together, how you could improve that maybe learn from those connectivities to be able to identify where other kinds of networks could be developed, but also to illustrate what is doable in one city and then transferable to another city. So this development of tools that can be used in this way that really do have their basis in the social sciences and the ecological and biophysical sciences, but actually helps you map and better understand what those connections are. So I think the improvement of these kinds of tools that actively recognize these kinds of the networks that we're talking about is a really important step forward. Okay, so moving on then to just describing some of the other types of work that's going on, and of course I have to talk more about okay. There we go. I'm talking more about the types of research that is being done within USDA. And I apologize. I realize I really should say research and development, because some of these characteristics are as much about our urban research as they are about our urban and community forestry programs and how we use them to deliver the science. But to me, these really help us bring some of the building blocks forward of how do you merge this 100 years of research that we've been doing in USDA and the Forest Service that really can be used as a base for further urban ecosystem work. And of course, I speak there about the forest inventory type work where we know a lot about how to count trees and to describe their structure. And how do you bring it into a more modern setting and answering some of the questions. And I think the evolution of our forest inventory from a very rural base to now looking at it in terms of urban systems is very important. And it also helps us describe the ecosystem services and the values that we have in those areas. And so we have some very important research going on looking at greenhouse gas mitigation and water and energy and other characteristics that these urban environments bring. Clearly, the social science aspect I've already mentioned, and this tie to human health and well-being, and being able to link the qualities of a green infrastructure with how you feel as an individual, but also how that translates to your actual health and well-being in these settings. I think the evolution of our work on urban sustainability has been a really consistent with what I was talking about before, this emergence of ecosystems and systems thinking about our urban environment, but also to be able to connect the social and biological, the socio-ecological science as a new way of doing business. So all of these areas, I think, have really grown in our emphasis in terms of the types of research that we do, understanding how an urban watershed can be quantified and mitigated just as a watershed back out of the Appalachians as an example, but putting it all together and being able to study these systems in a longer term is what I think is also reaping some benefits. And so our investment in urban long-term research, I think, has been started paying off dividends. And in this, I also commend the National Science Foundation's LTER urban sites, because I think they really started the whole concept of how do you bring urban environments into what has been a long-term investment by our premier science funding society or agency. But to be able to focus on urban areas as part of that network, I think, has really paid off a lot in how we've thought about things. And it actually has led to, I think, the idea of around the Ultra X's, the Urban Long-Term Research Area Exploratory Grants that created a whole new way of, I think, studying urban areas, proved to yet to be on how much change and what are some of the new ideas coming from that, but it was a much more deliberate way of linking the different sciences around urban areas. So I think that has been a really positive move in the USDA portfolio. And then the one that I think is still, we don't have a good handle on from where I sit in USDA is urban agriculture. And I say that because we have a whole lot of agencies at USDA that can help promote agricultural development, and they are designed to do that. But many of them don't have the authority to work in urban areas or even know how to do that. And yet there is an increasing, almost every week, somebody is talking to me about moving agricultural systems into urban environments and what that might look like. Investing in vertical agriculture. Well, I don't really know how we would do that, and yet there's a lot of discussion happening. Shouldn't USDA be part of it? I'd probably say yes. And so we need to start taking and thinking about how our traditional approaches to agriculture, especially the small farm, the specialty crops, the non-commodities in particular, do lend themselves to an agriculture environment in urban areas and can be really add and contribute to that overall ecosystem and much more sustainable system. And then the last thing I wanted to do is mention, since Gary mentioned my role on the Science and Technology for Sustainability roundtable of the National Academies, is to acknowledge that very early on, we adopted the need to be looking at urban sustainability as one of the themes that have been brought through the roundtable, which is a really lovely mix of academic, government, and private sector entities who all care about sustainability in one way or another. And I think we've been very successful in having several different workshops already that have focused in different parts of the country on pathways to urban sustainability. And then the next one will be in Portland this spring, and I think it's already been scheduled in May. And just to let you know that what this has helped us do is start thinking about, well, what are the differences that occur in many of these areas? What are there are the regional differences, how different cities are approaching sustainability, the aspects of maximizing benefits, managing trade-offs, what are the tools that they are using, but also what are the commonalities? And so even as we can describe differences and maybe describe why those are different and link them to a particular social pattern, well, there are also some commonalities. And if you can get out those fundamental truths and that really basic knowledge of how cities function from a sustainable perspective, then we then help use that to inform either changing the built infrastructure or as new cities develop and grow, being able to influence what those things look like. And so all of that this is building the science behind what we need, but I think also then tying it to the tools in terms of making decisions. So we've seen, I guess my bottom line, there's been an incredible evolution of this whole thought. I think all of you sitting here recognize that we are now talking about systems in a very different way. We're integrating sciences in a different way, especially the ecological, biophysical with the social. And I think we have some tremendous opportunities now to take those ideas and move them into practice. And that's hopefully what some of you will be doing when you leave this workshop. So thank you very much. And I don't know if I was supposed to leave some time for questions or any comment, but
one or two burning questions.
Or comment would be fine too. And then, are we good? Okay.
And just a reminder, if you could actually use the mics for questions or comments, that would help, because for the people who are on the webcast, that's the only way they'll hear you.
Yes. Well, I actually would like to learn more. What was mentioned for those of you who couldn't hear is that we have a colleague from Agricultural Research Service who was mentioning that our lab in Beltsville has a couple units, a couple projects going on in urban environments, one dealing with insects and, I sound like sustainable practices. Small and organic farms. So yes, I'd love to learn, because in fact, I think what we need to do is start rolling all this urban work that we're doing in various places at USDA into a bit more holistic package, because I think there's probably more out there than I know or realize, but it's being done by people like yourself who are operating within other agencies. Thank you for letting me know. Yes.
I wanted to hear how the USDA is defining sustainable in context of a growing population, a growing economy, and in general growing agriculture. How do you define sustainability in that context?
Well, I think you still have the first principles in sustainability where you are trying to balance the ecological, the social, and the economic. And so all of them have to be considered. And the scale at which you do that is what I think we need to really better understand. I certainly cannot say we have subject and verse of what we describe in all of these aspects as sustainability. It's manifesting itself in different areas so that as we develop, well, a good example is in the Beginning Farmers and Ranchers program and the aspects of growing new, especially specialty crops, small farm organic agriculture, recognizing, and in fact, many of those beginning farmers and ranchers are very interested in making sure that they do address water issues, that they do address air issues, that they in fact recognize biodiversity issues even as they're developing their agricultural systems. How that would translate to us is then making sure that when our research projects are done, that we're incorporating those factors into the analysis, and then when the tools are provided, like through Natural Resource Conservation Service, where they have lots of programs to help support good water quality practices, water drainage systems, that it translates that way. We also do have a sustainability office that tries to make sure that all the moving parts across USDA are thinking about these issues. But it is a work in progress, and I think we just need to keep reminding ourselves what comprises sustainability and sustainable practices. Time, okay. I think we have some time for discussion later on too. So. Okay, thank you very much.